Welcome back once again to Startups for the Rest of Us. This week's episode was quite a challenge, I have to admit. The show must go on, but Mike Tabor and I attempted to record a live episode on MicroConf On Air's live stream, and we got through it, but the number of technical challenges that were involved was ridiculous. And failure after failure. And I'm very thankful to editor Josh that he was able to clean the episode up, that it actually sounds mostly seamless, although there's differing audio quality at different times just due to streaming and buffering because we were not recording in Squadcast as we normally do. So obviously this episode will feel a little different. It is live, and sometimes I believe my AirPods connected and then disconnected. So I was on my non-podcast recording mic, on and on and on. I hope you enjoy this episode today where Mike and I run through our 2021 predictions. Mike.
Uh-oh.
What? In the original draft of Star Wars A New Hope, what was Luke Skywalker's last name?
Starkiller.
Oh, nailed it. In this episode of Startups for the Rest of Us, Mike and I talk about our predictions for 2021. This is Startups for the Rest of Us, episode 528. Welcome to Startups for the Rest of Us, the podcast that helps developers, designers, and entrepreneurs be awesome at building, launching, and growing startups. Whether you've built your fifth startup or you're thinking about your first. I'm Rob.
And I'm Mike.
And we're here to share our experiences to help you avoid the mistakes we've made. What is the word this week, sir?
Well, I have some big news to share. I am officially moving to Canada.
Are you really?
No. April Fool's Day.
Oh.
I figured, it's actually like March 3790th, but April 1st has got to be right around the corner. So I figured I'd spring one on you.
Oh my gosh. I thought you were serious. I was like, well, congratulations, sir. All right. So what's really going on though? What's really the word this week?
Not much. Just trying to wrap up the end of the year and get things all straightened out for next year. Mostly a lot of paperwork at this point and getting things together to have ready to send off for tax season. And I don't know, just wrapping up last minute implementations and sales and stuff like that.
Are you going to get a tax refund or are you going to pay?
Oh, I have no idea. I don't usually find out until March, April timeframe, something like that. I have no idea.
Cool, man. Well, let's dive in to reviewing our predictions that we made in December of 2018 for 2019. So we never did make 2020 predictions, but these are basically for 2 years ago. So you want to run through, we each had 4 predictions, and you can run through yours and give yourself a rating of 1 to 5 on accuracy, 5 being the most accurate, and then I'll do the same.
Sure. The first one was that a global downturn would be in full swing. And I was off by 1 year on this. I really feel like I was. So I don't feel like I should get credit for it. But at the same time, it was only off by a year. And it does feel like 2020 is kind of a global downturn. So I'd probably only give myself maybe 2.5 on this one. I'd probably lean towards a lower score, like maybe 1.5 or 2 instead, just because I was off by the year, but it's not to say it didn't come true. The second one was esports leagues getting a TV channel aside from Twitch. And I think you told me that apparently that already existed. So 5, I guess.
You predicted something that had already happened.
Yes, it's like a reverse Nostradamus. My third prediction was something bad would happen with Tesla, SpaceX, or Elon Musk. And I have to say, in retrospect, looking back at that, there were some tweets. His behavior had gotten more and more outrageous. And then he was essentially forced to step down as the chairman of the board, I believe, by the SEC. And they fined him like $20 million or something like that.
But that happened in September of 2018. And we recorded this in December. This was months later. I think you were predicting something even more.
Oh, I don't think that actually happened until the spring, though. It was like February of 2019. Okay.
And did Elon Musk step down as CEO? He steps down as chairman, and this is September 19th, 2018, nytimes.com.
Oh, okay. All right.
So 3 months prior. So I think you were predicting something more would happen.
Right.
I vaguely recall.
And I thought there was some other stuff that came out afterwards, like in the spring of the following year, where they came out and fined him and did a bunch of other stuff. But I could be wrong on that. So we'll say 2.
I don't remember him getting fined after that. And I'm trying to think, even aren't there, the stock prices are all up? Yeah, I don't know, man. I would think this is a miss as well. I just don't know
Well,
of anything that happened.
the article I was looking at said that he had tweeted something out that showed it was a picture and it said 4,000 Tesla cars loading for SF in Europe. And he tweeted that on February 19th, 2019. And then after that, like his general counsel resigned and then all this other stuff. So yeah, there was a bunch of stuff that happened afterwards. I give myself a 3 on that one. And then the last one was Amazon will overtake Apple in terms of market cap. And I think I was pretty far off on that one. So that would be a 1, maybe a 0. I mean, it was within the realm of possibility, but it certainly, I don't think that it happened.
All right. So let's see if we can get through my 4 predictions here that I made, again, back in December of 2018 for 2019. So the first was that cryptocurrencies would have ups and downs, but there would be no major boom in 2019, but that I was still bullish long term. And I actually, and now we're having a big boom in 2020. So I would give myself like a 4 on that. Because there was no boom in 2019 and there is a boom right now. I mean, the bullish long-term thing, it remains to be seen, but I'd give myself a 3 or a 4. I predicted 2019 would be the year of AR, of augmented reality. And I would give myself a 1 or whatever the lowest score is on that. Cause I don't feel like, I remember being like, no, AR is going to take off and there'll be a headset and, we'll be doing it. And like every prediction with technology, it's probably, probably 5 years early. There would be a Facebook antitrust suit brought against them, an antitrust suit brought against Facebook. I literally predicted that for 2019. And there would be the rise of a new social network as a result, because they would either get broken up or get kind of, handicapped by it. So that's one where, for 2019, I get a 0, but for 2020, that just happened 2 weeks ago for those watching in the future, literally Facebook antitrust suit. So it's funny how the timing works out. And then I made a bold prediction that Twitter would be acquired, which did not happen. So that is an absolute fail. So you and I have never really had good track records with these. I think predictions like kind of tough, especially the bolder, like you want to make them bold so that they're fun to talk about. And the bolder they are, the less likely they're to happen in the next 12 months.
Right.
I think a lot of our predictions, I bet if we went back, a lot of them happened eventually.
Sure.
Right?
I don't think people are going to be predicting things that are just never, just not even within the realm of possibility. But eventually, at some point, sure, they could all happen.
Cool. So with that, sir, let's dive in. Let's see. We each have 5 predictions for 2021. And why don't you kick us off with yours?
So my first prediction is sort of based loosely on current events, but I believe that commercial office space real estate will never recover. And I think that that's going to be a function of these large businesses that have sent everybody home for long stretches of time, whether, initially they thought it was only going to be a couple of weeks, and then they realized it was several months, and now it's stretched out in some cases to 6 months, a year, 2 years at this point. And they've realized that they actually don't need those big office spaces. So they have these big buildings in places, whether they've either purchased it or rented it, and they come to find out and realize like, hey, we can actually make this work and we don't need these spaces. We can have all of our workers at home and we can cut a lot of expenses by doing so. And in some cases, they're cutting millions of dollars by being able to do that, and they're making it work. So I think that knowing that they're able to survive without this office environment is going to encourage them to continue down that path, and they're just not going to come back. There are certainly some who are going to, but for the most part, that stuff's gone away. There's still going to be a lot of services, real estate for like salons and, phone repair and retail and things like that. But the actual office space stuff, I think that's gone, and I don't think it'll ever come back. Bold
prediction, sir. What's funny is as you talk and you say these companies have realized they don't need the office space, they can be remote. Does it feel to you like they're finally catching up to what the Microconf community has been doing for a decade? Because we didn't have the money and to hire talent, you couldn't afford to hire talent in a major city. So we always hired remote. And it's like, oh, you're getting here too now.
I feel like it's kind of harkening back to my consulting days where I would go into a company and they'd say, oh, this can't be done, or we can't do it this way. And I'd ask the questions, why not? But because I'm an outside person, in some cases, they would just obliterate it as, no, that's completely a non-starter, even though I'd made it work at other companies. And then there's other cases where they're like, oh, that's a great idea. Why didn't we think of it? And it's just like, it wasn't that you didn't think of it or nobody talked to you about it. You just didn't believe it until you actually saw it. So I think that's more of it than anything else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that. My first prediction is that privacy concerns will continue to transform email marketing back to what it used to be, which was basically spray and pray. And obviously over the past 15, 20 years, I mean, if you think way back to early days, Constant Contact around 2000, you kind of got some open rates and some click-through rates, but a lot of people didn't pay attention to them. And you just had this list that you sent broadcasts to, and you didn't do any type of tagging or behavioral-based email. You didn't write anything specific for different segments. And then over the next 10, 12 years, that became a thing. Marketing automation and the tagging and everything became a thing as Infusionsoft, Marketo, Pardot, Drip, and then MailChimp added them, and Aweber added that type of stuff. But the privacy concerns with tracking pixels, in essence, inside emails is becoming more and more of an issue. And this year with Hey.com, with the Basecamp guys putting out Hey and saying, we're going to block all tracking pixels. And I believe they're like going to shame people in the app, right, who send tracking pixels. Like there's kind of becoming this backlash about it. And so while certainly I don't think every email client will do that instantly, much like not provided started happening in Google and much like SSL everywhere became a thing, I do think there's a movement towards essentially blocking a lot of the good metrics that an email service provider can get from email broadcasts or an email automation. And once you lose a lot of that stuff, you start to lose the helpfulness of the tagging. And it's not, you can't have any automations, but it's going to kind of set email marketing back, 5 or 10 years.
My second prediction is related to government regulations on big tech. And there's actually a couple of different things that will kind of fall under this umbrella for my prediction. So this is almost like a two-parter. And the first one is going to be, there's going to be a over attempt by a government, and I'm going to, kind of lump a couple of them together, like the United States, either the United States federal government, the European Union, or maybe even I doubt a state government would have the ability to do this, but they're going to attempt to break up at least one of the big tech companies. And my money on that would be on Facebook, but I think that Amazon, Apple, and Google are kind of all there in the crosshairs. But I think that Facebook is probably the one that it would end up being targeted if any of them were. And then my second prediction under regulations is that governments are going to actively crack down on the gig economy, and essentially people who are doing side jobs or they're stringing together multiple side jobs in order to either make a living or make extra money on the side. Those type of people, I think the governments are going to look at those and say, well, not only are they very high at risk for getting COVID or other things, I think the problem that the government's going to look at and see is that those people don't have any health care or health insurance or have low access to it, and they're not treated well, they're not paid well, and therefore need to be protected. So I think that the governments are going to crack down on those things and put legislation and regulations in place and not just talk about it. They've talked about it before. They've tried to do things in, like the California state government has tried to do things, but no one's ever really made a concerted effort. And I think that this year is going to be the year that they do that.
I mean, that's kind of already happening, right? There's a lawsuit against Facebook and Google, lawsuits from 40 something states and the federal government. And are you kind of piggybacking on that and saying the result of that lawsuit will be that they try to break one of these up?
So there's a difference between suing them and then trying to get them to change their practices. I think they're going to go that extra step and they're going to say, no, what you've proposed is not acceptable. We want to break you up. Similar to what they did back with Microsoft. And then Microsoft did all these different things. And so that never actually came to happen. But I think that they're going to push for that hard enough that it's going to get to that point where that's on the table as a potential resolution. Whether it happens or not is a different story. But I think that it's going to get to that point where it is pushed and it is openly on the table and everyone's talking about it.
I think it's on the table already. I think the prediction, to be bold, would be that it will happen, right? People are already mentioning it. I mean, the first news article I read was like, could they be broken up? That's kind of the first thing that folks are saying. Sure. I would also say that Facebook and Google have a suit against them, and Apple doesn't yet, right? But I believe they, my opinion is Google, Facebook, and Apple are monopolies. Amazon is not a monopoly in anything. Like every big major thing they have, maybe Kindle is the only one I can think of. Can you think of another thing they're monopoly in? Because they don't own enough of the e-commerce market to be a monopoly.
I think that there are spaces of the e-commerce market where they are doing things that are monopolistic, such that they own the platform and they're allowing people to sell like the fulfillment by Amazon. And then I believe that they're using some of that data to decide what products that they should offer as white label Amazon products. And they're using sales data that they shouldn't. And that kind of came out a little bit. It was at least alluded to in some of the congressional testimony this past year, but it was never concretely confirmed one way or the other. So I think there's definitely arguments there.
Yeah, I hear that. I think that the white label stuff you're mentioning is anti-competitive, but I don't believe it's monopolistic. And that gets into it being that maybe like to do an antitrust suit and to try to break up a monopoly, you really need compelling evidence that they are a monopoly. Now they could be sued, I believe, for anti-competitive practices with the white label stuff, but it's just such a different game, you know? Because with Walmart and Target and Best Buy and all these other retailers, Amazon has like the majority of the market, but they don't have that 90 something percent penetration that Google does or Facebook does or, you know, whatever Apple has. And
I think where it becomes the monopoly behavior is where they've got they have access to and visibility to sales data for their competitors directly in the platform that they're selling on. That's where it becomes abuse of a monopoly platform.
It's anti-competitive, but it's monopoly is a very specific definition. It's where you own almost all the market and no one else can compete. And frankly, Walmart is competing, you know, that Shopify stores are competing against Amazon, but anti-competitive it's not right that what they're doing, but it's a different name. And I don't know that you can bring an antitrust suit against them. Okay. So it's just interesting because I'm in the same boat where I think Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Google, these are all huge companies. They must be monopolies. But I only think 3 of them are. I don't think Amazon is. And they probably, knowing Bezos, he's a pretty smart guy to have not done that they've gotten this big without being a monopoly in any space. They have the Amazon, AWS and Google App Engine, and Azure are both like good, solid competitors of them, you know?
Right.
Again, Kindle is the one I can think of where they just own the vast, vast majority of that market. But anyways, yeah, good prediction, sir. So my second prediction is that in 2021, in-person events will happen, but adjustments will be put in place. And so there will be, whether it's social distancing early in the year or masks being worn, you know, just all the stuff that we've kind of seen around. And then as we get towards the end of the year, I think that less and less of that stuff will be needed.
Cool. My third prediction is related to healthcare, and I think there's going to be a major breakthrough in nanotechnology. So obviously, there's been a lot of advances with the COVID vaccine, but I think that this is going to get to the point where it could be something like an implanted chipset that is intended to go mainstream. Whether I don't believe it would go mainstream next year, but I do think that somebody's going to come out with something where the intention is to do that. It might also be something like that is much more, I'll say, specialized. Like it could be an artificial organ, like an artificial one that has not been developed yet. So maybe pieces that would augment your liver, or maybe a replacement kidney, something along those lines. Could also just be something that's like a little bit more simplistic, that is for either monitoring or diagnosing ongoing biofunctions. It could be used for surgery or for post-op care, something along those lines. So in those cases, it obviously wouldn't be mainstream so much as it would be for specifically hospitals or surgery centers, where they can just put this in you and implant it and then use it to assist them with whatever it is that they're doing. And I think people will be terrified by this whole idea, because they'll be like, oh my God, Bill Gates is trying to microchip us.
Only some people will be terrified by it. And there'll be people who are totally willing to do it. You know, I like that prediction. We got a prediction from the chat from Ken Wallace. He says, be bold, predict that 2021 is the year of universal basic income. UBI, Mike, I don't think it'll be a thing in the US. I can totally imagine some countries in Europe giving it a try this in 2021.
Yeah, I definitely could as well. I think it'll be a long time before something like that happens in the US, but Europe, I think, is definitely a lot more progressive from that standpoint, and I could see them doing it.
Yeah, I'm not read up, enough on UBI to have too much intelligent thought on it. But my third prediction is that funding in the startup space in general will, and especially I guess in the bootstrapper space, will continue its kind of destigmatization as more founder-friendly options continue to show up and continue to expand. It's interesting. I think it was back in when was it that I predicted it? But it was something about that there would be more bootstrappers raising funding. This was like 3 years ago. And it was before I started TinySeed, I'm pretty sure. And I was just seeing Indie.vc was around, and then revenue-based financing started happening, with the SaaS capitals and the wider capitals. And it just made sense that more people who maybe wouldn't have wanted to go venture track 5 years ago would potentially want to do the kind of I'll say the fund strapping route, or just, the raise one small round to go to profitability, or do revenue-based financing, or just do the non-venture track, really. Any of those options. It's not binary anymore. Bootstrap versus venture. It's, I can bootstrap, I can do one round, I can take money from TinySeed, I can take money from Indie.vc, I can do revenue-based financing if I get to the point where that makes sense, or I can take venture. It's like this whole buffet of options. And so what it feels to me, it hasn't happened with everyone, but there is a destigmatization of funding, whereas funding used to come with a lot of strings attached, loss of control, can't sell my company, I got kicked out as a CEO, I have to put up with these venture capitalists breathing down my neck and this board and blah, blah, blah. And it's like all those things, poof, if you want to take funding from certain people under certain circumstances, none of that exists anymore. And there are different constraints, but the optionality that founders have, especially bootstrap SaaS founders have these days, are tremendous. So I think that 2021 basically continues that destigmatization process.
I would agree with that. It's a good prediction, I think. My fourth prediction has to do with movies. And specifically, I think that the Marvel Cinematic Universe the following is going to somewhat fall off a cliff. I think it'll be subtle at first, and then people are just going to be like, yeah, I'm not into this. And I think the reason specifically for that is that they're getting into the territory of going and pulling out some of their, I'll say, second tier characters to draw them to the forefront, which I agree with that as a general strategy and thing that they should do, because there's lots of characters that are probably less popular. But because they're less popular and people haven't heard of them, I think that there's going to be a lot less interest in those. So like Iron Man is an obvious draw, but there's a lot of these other characters that they're pulling out, like Doctor Strange, where some people I don't even really know who that is. I've never heard of that person before, even if they're like peripherally involved or knowledgeable about comic books and things like that. I just think that a lot of those characters are not going to be nearly as big a draw, and it could result in them scaling back what they're going to be doing in the future. And I'm a little, I don't want to say concerned, but I do think that what they're going to find is that following it ramped up for the longest time until, the last couple of Avengers movies. And then I think it's going to fall off a cliff and they're not going to quite know what to do with it. It's very similar to they released the new Star Wars Solo movie, and then it didn't do as well as they had hoped it would or thought it would. And then they're going to pull back on the reins.
That's a bold prediction. And I hope that doesn't happen, because I
hope it doesn't either.
Yeah, but it is a prediction. See, that's the thing though, man. Oh yeah. So one example is Moon Knight, right? It's like anyone who didn't read comics is like, Moon Knight, who's that? But he's, slated for, I don't know, a movie or a show or something coming up. And when they did, I remember when they did Iron Man and Captain America, Iron Man always had a comic, but he really was not a prominent, he was fine, but he was not that prominent the way he is today, where it's like, no, Iron Man is one of the leaders of the Avengers. And right. Even Captain America, I remember I was like, this movie's going to be terrible. And then I saw it and I was like, I cannot believe how good that movie was. I can't believe that they made such an amazing, compelling story from that character. So I hear you. I appreciate the boldness of your prediction. I hope it doesn't come true. And I do wonder if I know they're already doing several Marvel TV shows in essence, or, streaming shows on Disney Plus. And that's basically what Star Wars has gone through. If you heard, they did 10 Star Wars announcements a couple days ago, or it was last week, I guess. And I believe 7 or 8 of them are essentially 8 episode seasons of streaming shows. And only 2 of them are films, which is fascinating.
I think it's fascinating, but it's also them hedging their bets in such a way where they're not betting everything on this massive movie offering, and they're spending, hundreds of millions of dollars, and they may ultimately spend hundreds of millions of dollars on a particular storyline, but by doing it through their Disney Plus platform. And that's the thing, is they've got all these different channels and ways to distribute it where they can put it as a TV show. It's less effort, less money, less production costs, all these other things that go into it. And then they can essentially gauge the market, but also build interest in that storyline. And when it gets to a certain point and they can say, oh, well, this justifies having an actual movie. And now we've amassed the interest, as opposed to they come out with a new storyline or a new movie for this character nobody's ever heard of. And it's just it'll be like John Carter. They're like, oh, wait a second. Who's John Carter? What are you talking about? And unless you've ever read those books, you would have no idea. And it's not an interesting story.
Yep. I hear you there, sir. Speaking of that, we'll get back to startups in a second. Are you watching The Mandalorian?
Yeah.
You like it?
Yeah, it's good so far.
I think it's really good. I'm stoked on it. All right. My next prediction, fourth prediction, is that VR will become mainstream.
You just ripped that off from one of the listeners.
Yeah. I got an Oculus Quest 2 about 3 weeks ago, and it is a consumer level. It's about a $300 headset. You don't need a computer to run it. So it just connects to your Wi-Fi, and then you get on your mobile phone or your iPad. It is amazing. The kids love it. It was $300. And it just works. You just plug it in and it works, you know? I mean, you don't even have to plug it in. It's completely wireless. And it's such a leap and a bound from, I need to go out and get a Windows PC with, that's all beefy. And I mean, frankly, we bought one about a month ago, and within 2 weeks, Sherry's like, I think we should have two, because you can do a bunch of cooperative games with them and stuff. And I can easily see us just picking one up every quarter next year, because a lot of the co-op games go up to 4 people. And I'm not saying Oculus, it's the only one I've owned, right? So I'm not comparing it to other things. I'm just saying, if they can build a headset this good for $300 and sell it for $300, where are we headed next? Where is the $199, the $99 headset? And the experience of it is amazing. Like, it truly is game changing. Certainly, if you've never done VR, it's a trip. And even if you have done it, like, to sit and be able to play it for 60, 90 minutes and go into VR worlds is, it's like we've seen in the movies for 30 or 40 years, but I think 2021 is the year.
2 related anecdotes. One's, I remember seeing a VR headset from like 20 years ago. It had this like little hockey puck thing that you had to hold, and you could move your head up and you could see everything. It was like this little LCD screens in front of you, but this was back, I mean, it was literally 1996, something like that. It was ridiculously early. So not nearly as good as what they have today. But the other somewhat related anecdote is, when I was a kid, I had actually wanted to be a science fiction writer. And one of the ideas that I'd come up with for a storyline was, in the future, there's a future where people are not fighting wars anymore. They're basically fighting with these virtual reality simulators, where they're like almost in like this giant robot or something like that, and they're battling each other for control of different territories, but they are augmented in such a way that it becomes real. So when you shoot at somebody, it's not just a laser blast. Like, there are physical sensors and stuff built into the suits and stuff that the people had to wear. And you could literally take physical damage from somebody shooting you inside of the, quote unquote simulation. And then there's like backstories where like people do nefarious things and sabotage other people's suits and stuff like that. So I never really fully published anything or came out with it, but that was the idea I had a long time ago.
I like that kind of stuff. All right. That was VR Oculus. So we're on to your 5th and final prediction for 2021. Although before we do that, it looks like we had a little more in the chat. Ken Wallace said, my Mandalorian prediction, Grogu goes to the dark side. Grogu is this a spoiler? Grogu goes to the dark side, but comes back after destroying the Darksaber. Xander's note, I still refuse to call him by his name, which is true. And all right, we have a prediction from Salih Kagdasdaria. He says, Next.js, GraphQL, and Tailwind CSS will become extremely popular. I think that's already happened, hasn't it? They all seem super popular to me. I keep hearing about them, but I guess it depends on what we mean by super popular.
If they get websites, we know they're going to hold.
Right. Cool. You want to dive into your 5th and final?
Yeah. So my 5th and final prediction here is that we will discover definitive proof of extraterrestrial life. I don't know what exact form that's going to take, whether it's going to be Mars or some comet or, an asteroid going by, but that's the prediction here. And I think that there's a lot of scientific discovery going on right now where people are trying to pull back that information from outer space. I think they've even recently sent a rocket out to an asteroid that was going by planet Earth and brought some of the materials back. It took like 3 or 4 years or something like that to get it. I don't know if they've analyzed it yet or not, but they do have other ongoing things going on. And I think we're going to get something. Now, does that mean that we're going to see proof of little green men? No, that's not necessarily the case. It could very well just be like single-celled things. But the idea there is that it's not just particles from Earth that ended up in outer space because they were, on a rocket or something like that, or a spacecraft, and then we find them elsewhere. It's that, they are actually extraterrestrial in origin. So off of anywhere, whether it's Mars or the moon, something like that.
That is a bold prediction, sir.
Mm-hmm.
I like it.
I figured I had to go with one that was like kind of off the wall. I felt like if you're going to do predictions, you may as well go all in at some point.
That's Babe Ruth calling his shot, right? You're trying to go. My 5th and final prediction is that in terms of the world and COVID, everyone's predicting, it's like middle of the year and then not to the end of the year. And I've heard people say like, it's going to be 5 years, like till everyone feels back to normal, or end of 2022 till things are back. And I think we're going to get back to normal a lot faster than we think, at least within our home countries. I know traveling internationally is going to be different because different countries are handling things. But as vaccines roll out, as we get herd immunity, I think the cases are going to drop faster. And I also think people's comfort level and a lot of people's desire just to not be cooped up and to go out and go to in-person events or go to movies or go to concerts, the desire to go to those things is there, and it's pent up. There's pent up demand now. And I think I know several people, the moment they get cleared, when they have that second vaccination, like they want to go and do all the things. And I'm probably one of them. I'm not an extrovert. And yet I want to go work at coffee shops again. I mean, we went out to restaurants during Minnesota opened up for a while and we're back closed again, but we were doing those things, but I still really miss just being able to get out. So I think it's going to happen fast. I'm a eternal optimist on this front, actually.
I think you're doing a lot of projection there, because on the other side of the spectrum, I almost got a t-shirt that literally said, "When this is over, I still don't want to see some of you."
Yeah, I like that one. And I had the 2020 0 out of 10 would not recommend shirt with the 0 stars.
I've got the 2020 dumpster fire t-shirt.
Yeah, I have a few of them. Well, man, those are our predictions, and we get to revisit those in just about a year.
And see if any of us gets above like 3, 4.
Yeah. If we get more than 1 3, that's probably the goal for next time. The theme music that we couldn't play today, but was edited in post, is an excerpt from We're Out of Control by Moot, and that's used under Creative Commons. Obviously, you can search for Startups in any podcatcher and subscribe to us. And always head to startupsfortherestofus.com for a full transcript of each episode. After this is cleaned up, it's going to be nice and tight. So thank you so much for listening. And Mike and I will see you next time.
Take it easy.